Somebody's son just asked me what I would like to have up to half of his net worth. Oh my God, babe of life, this is so good. Oh my God. Okay, Yewande, stay calm. Why don't we start with the ranch in Texas? Oh, I have a better idea. BMW X. Now, let me be realistic. How about a Range Rover? Maybe a private jet, maybe a bowl of corn. In a relationship, the way you approach somebody, the way you bring yourself to the table shows what you are going to get out of that interaction. If Esther had approached her husband like a slave, she would have gotten what is deserving of a slave. But we saw this woman, she approached her husband in a specific way. She approached her husband in a specific look. She approached her husband in a specific position. The Bible said she put on a royal robe of self-confidence. It is a royal robe of self-confidence that allows this woman to know that you own your space and you give your man his own space. Every man likes to be in their own space. They like to do their own thing. You want your man to be able to sit. When you allow the man sit, it's easier for you to stand. Welcome to the How platform. My name is Yewande. By the way, if you're just joining this channel for the first time, I teach on faith and lifestyle. Purposefully, I focus on growth in faith and lifestyle. And in the series that we've been covering, we've been talking on the process of rising. And I focus on the process of rising in the palace in the last 5 videos. We've been focusing on how Esther rose up to the task of delivering her people from the danger that Haman was planning against the Jews. So Esther at some point decided that she was going to step up to help her people and deliver them from the hand of Haman, because Haman already set out to destroy the Jews. When Mordecai approached Esther, Esther said, "Go and tell the people we will fast, I will fast." So this was a woman who started fasting. At this point, this woman was in a relationship where she can't just approach her king, approach her husband. You know, I think something that we want to understand is that as we rise, the composition or the dynamics in our relationship could be changing. As we are rising in life, as we are rising in the journey of growth, the dynamics of our relationship could be changing. So I'm not surprised when this woman said she can't just approach the king without being invited, because this is the king who is like a ruler of the entire world. Is like a controller of the entire world, because at that point Babylon was like the power controller of the world. So it was like approaching somebody that is powerful. So if you are not invited, you don't just barge into the king. And Esther respected her husband, respected the king's space. So Esther said, "Go and fast for me. I will fast." And then on the 3rd day, we saw that this queen decided to do something powerful. And the lesson that I drew from this story, I am just going to share it. And I'm not just going to be very deep about the lesson, but I want you to pick your lesson, because the first thing that I'm going to speak on is the role of Esther. You want to think of this lesson like an hodgepodge. I'm going to do like a blend of Esther character, a blend of the king's character, and I'm going to blend it together and how their marriage looked like. So at this point in their marriage, the relationship that they have is like a relationship whereby both of them are both busy. So they are kind of high flyers at this point. So they are busy man and woman at that point. So they don't have you have to schedule something to be able to get something out of each of them. But Esther, when she realized she needed some help from the king, she engaged in a spiritual fasting, waiting on God and praying. And then the Bible made us understand that it came to pass on the 3rd day. So it was a 3-day fasting. Day 1, Esther didn't approach the king. Day 2, Esther didn't approach the king. And then on day 3, the end of the fast, because you have to move when the spirit is moving. At the point when Esther was already praying, heaven was engaged on her behalf. So the day 1, she was praying. The day 2, she was praying. And then the day 3, heaven was already engaged. Waiting at that point and delaying the move will be foolish on Esther's part. So Esther moved immediately on the 3rd day. And what we saw for this woman is that when she moved on the 3rd day, she didn't move and sat in front of the king's inner court and started speaking in tongues or praying and saying, "Oh, you king, you're going to show me favor." That was not what we saw for Esther. She didn't show up in front of the king and said, "Oh, my husband, I would like to discuss something with you. It is very, very important." She didn't just approach him like an ordinary man. She approached the king like a king. She approached her king, her husband, like a king. In a relationship, the way you approach somebody, the way you bring yourself to the table shows what you are going to get out of that interaction. If Esther had approached her husband like a slave, she would have gotten what is deserving of a slave. If Esther had approached her husband like a girl, she would have gotten what is deserved of a girl. If Esther had approached her husband like a slut, she would have gotten what is deserving of a slut. If Esther had approached her husband like the wife, she would have gotten what is deserving of a wife. But we saw this woman, she approached her husband in a specific way. She approached her husband in a specific look. She approached her husband in a specific position. The Bible said she put on a royal robe. I want you to pay attention. She put on a royal robe. That means she didn't just wear just anything. She didn't just dress anyhow. She put on a royal robe. She knows that when you want to approach royalty, there is a way royalty look. There is a way you look like in a royal house that you could easily get a royal attention. So Esther put on a royal robe. And then she stood. The Bible made us understand that she stood. Standing means you are balanced. She stood. She was not jittering. She was not bowing down her head. She stood. Her shoulder like angled well. Her neck right above, right in the right place, looking straight. She stood. There's certain things that I want to first highlight, even with this woman. The Bible made us understand that she stood. She understood her position. She knew that she is a queen of a king. She knew what she brought to the table. She was not a woman that was afraid to own her own space. She was not a woman that was afraid to own her own beauty. She was not a woman that was afraid to own her own sensuality, to own every aspect of her that would help her get the attention of her husband. She knew what she brought to the table and she was not afraid to play to her strengths. That was something that I knew for this woman. She put on her royal robe and she stood, well balanced, well confident. She stood. She knew the spice and the oil and the spice and the look that would get the king to turn in her direction. She knew the way she looked at her husband and would get the husband to look at her differently, like the king. She knew the robe that she would wear, that the husband will not just take her as one of those women, but will know, that's my girl, that's my wife, that's my queen. Esther played to her own strengths. She stood. I've highlighted that she wore a royal apparel. I've highlighted that she stood in the inner court. She didn't just stand like a stranger. I mean, she's married to the queen. She can't stand as a stranger. But you'll be shocked that some folks will be acting like a stranger in their own marriage, in their own home. This woman, she didn't act like a stranger. Of course, she respected the protocol for approaching the king, the powerful man in this story. But one thing that we saw is that she stood in the inner courts. You know, when I was talking about relationship, I said something that you want to think of yourself as the center of that relationship, and you have the inner group, you have the outer group community, and your broader community. Esther brought it closer. She brought it into the inner court, to the inner court of the king's house. She was not just in the outer court of the king's house, where all the crowd is, where all the noise is, where all the families are, where all the drama is. She brought it into the inner court. She made sure she highlights her own uniqueness. She was looking like a queen, and she brought her own power, her own engagement, her own sexuality. All the things that she brought into that marriage, she brought it into the inner court. Bring it closer. Bring it closer. I mean, she was not just standing as a stranger. You will be shocked how some women act like a stranger in their own marriage. You have to own it. You have to own it in order to get it. This woman owned it. She didn't stay at the outer court. She brought it closer to the inner court. I'm going to pause on Esther's character, and I'm quickly going to move on to the king's character here, because the major part of that verse 1 started describing the king. It said Esther stood in the inner court of the king's house, over the king's house, and the king sat. So there was a timing to Esther showing up to stand. She knew that the king was sitting at that time. So this king has a house. This king has a seat. This king has a throne. This king has a gate. And this king has a crown. Okay? So I've highlighted something about the king. Like every usual king that you will see, he has a house, he has a throne, he has a gate, he has a seat, and he has a crown. Every man wants to feel this way. Every man wants to be treated like a king. But what you own, how you sit, what you wear, what you control will affect how you perceive yourself as a king. If you change the dynamics of a relationship in such a way that you are not having your own house in order, there is no crown sitting on your head, you are not leading and providing that strategic leadership for the house or for the home, and you are not bringing your power into the decision table, and you are not able to control the gate of the things that come in and goes out of your house or of your home, and you are not wearing your own crown as a king, you are changing the dynamics of that relationship. You are changing the experience for your spouse in that relationship, and the dynamics of that marriage is changing. And don't be surprised if at some point your queen approached you and said you are too boring. Because every woman wants to look at their king and look at him and said, oh my God, he's calling the shots. He's controlling things. He is a king in his own space. He owns it. People answers to him. He answers to some people. He's the one driving the decision of the house. He's the one leading on the vision on the home. He's the one that is making the provision for what we need in the house. He has a house. This king has a house. So whatever I am driving, I am seeing in my king is a derivative power. I don't want you to think about this as like being overly materialistic as a woman. I want you to think of it as what makes a man to exude some certain level of confidence that triggers the romance in a marriage. When you look at your man and you know that he's got it all under control. When you look at a man that you know that he has a direction over the house. When you look at a man and he sits like a king in his house, he knew what is going on in the home. He's not somebody that you need to remind him when it's time to pay the tuition. He's not somebody that you need to remind him that a kid is going into college in the next 2 years. He is not somebody that you have to remind him that, oh, the wife's birthday is in a couple of days. He's a man that sits confidently, he's got his house in order, is in control. Such a man will easily attract the attention of a queen. And that's what we saw in this relationship. The queen stood in her space, and the husband, the king, also stood in his space. He sat. He sat. There is a level of confidence when you look at your man. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're taking care of the home, you're taking care of the children, and your husband sits saying, thank you, well done, my wife. This is what next we're doing in the family. This is the next direction for us for 2025. And it is easier to submit to a man that has direction. That is the point I'm trying to make here. It is easier to request from a man that has a strategic position. It is easier to leverage the power of a man who has a strategic power, who owns his own space. It is easier to request from a man who is not depending on you. One thing that I want you to know, and I want you to stay with me, is that when the queen, who is supposed to be standing in her position, and the king, who is supposed to be sitting in his position, when there is a change in the dynamics of that relationship, you are messing up things in that relationship, and you are messing up things in that marriage. The queen stood, the king sat. The queen stood, the king sat. There is a level of confidence when you look at a man who sits, because when you sit, it shows some level of calmness, it shows some level of quietness, it shows some level of attention to details. Because when you sit, it shows that you can see things clearly. When you sit, it shows some level of emotional intelligence from that man. It shows some level of an art of listening. When you remember when they brought that prostitute to Jesus, who was caught in the middle of adultery. When they brought her to Jesus and they said, we caught her in the very act. Jesus stood down. Because what you sit when you are standing is different from what you see when you are sitting. And it's very different from what you see when you stoop down low to serve. Every position has a level of the way you sit, and every of those sitting gives you different level of access. As a woman naturally, on average, are more prone to have more emotional intelligence. That is psychological proven, is a fact. Women have higher emotional intelligence. When a woman is standing, what a woman will see when she's standing, even if a man sits on top of a house, they can't get that level of precision and perspective. So you want to think of this relationship. Both of them took their own position. They were able to own their own space. The woman stood in the inner court and the man sat on his own throne. Not jittering, not losing his confidence. You know, there is a level of romance that comes when you look at your man and he's sitting, he's in control of things. He's not a man that is asking you, what are we going to do now, my darling? What are we going to do now? He's the man that will say, this is what we are going to do. What do you think about my idea? is a man that has a direction for the home, that has a direction on where we are going next. It is easy to submit to such a man who keeps his house in order. It is easy to submit to a man who sits on the matter of his house, who knows about the matter going on in his house. He knows about the matter going on in the life of his teenagers. He knows about the matter that is going on in the life of his businesses. He knows about the matter of what is going on in the matter of his wife. A man who knows himself, who owns his own space, will trigger submission. It is easier to submit to such a man. And I'm not trying to be harsh on you as a man. Being able to own this house, to sit on your own throne confidently and wear your crown with confidence and courage and strength, it takes a lot of time to get there. It takes a lot of practice to get there. And it takes also a woman who stood in her position to get there. And for the woman who stood in her own space, who owns her own space, who knows how to play to her own strength, who knows what she needs to look like, who knows what she needs to look like for her to trigger the attention of her husband, it takes the help of a man to get that woman, that confident woman, to that point. So being able to understand the dynamics of your relationship is very, very important, because relationships are in stages. And what do I mean by stages? So I already highlighted a man who owns his throne, who sits in his house, who wears his crown, who sits on his seat. That's the description of a man, of the king. And then we have the woman who stood in a spot wearing a royal throne and approaching a king. That is also a description of a woman who is confident. Both of them have their own male and female confidence. Because when you change the dynamics of that relationship, you are disrupting that marriage. When you change the dynamics of that relationship, you are disrupting that marriage. When the woman is now the one sitting, who is now in control of things, who is now wearing the crown over the house, who is now taking control over the business of the house, who is now in charge of every detail of the house, who is now in charge of finance, is in charge of health, is in charge of any emotion, is the one driving the relationship, who is the one asking when there is going to be the next date. There is a change in the composition of that family. That is disruption 101, starting right there. Everyone has to own their space and stay in their space to have a healthy and balanced relationship. So I mentioned something about different stages in relationship. And I've been there myself. In these different stages, you start off when you're dating, you're calling each other, everyone is acting in love. We are so much in love. You're calling, you're trying to ask each other, what would you like? Sometimes you're in a call for hours. I remember when I just started in my relationship, when we're dating, we'll be on a call over the night. That was when MTN will allow people to call freely, and we'll be on the call for the entire night. And I was going to work the next day. So much. We were so in love. In love. But I want you to know that love is not enough to make a marriage successful. Because there is a very thin line between love and lust. There's a very thin line. So love is not enough to keep a marriage. Commitment comes to place. So we took that commitment further and we decided to sign the dotted line and we got married. That's the stage one of your relationship. Both of you are married. Who you marry is not a person. Who you marry is an experience. That is why who you are becoming in that relationship is important. When you step into marriage, you are not marrying a person, you are marrying an experience. Which is why you want to own your space. If every experience you are having in that marriage is turning you into the opposite of yourself, that marriage is becoming unhealthy. You need to find a way to change the dynamics. So in the early stage of marriage, lot of drama, lot of arguments. Lot of fights. I recall that the early stage of our marriage, the only time we were not fighting is when we were fighting and keeping malice. I'll be very open with you. We were arguing over things, over different things. We are different stages in life, in ages, in maturity. We didn't know how to stand. I didn't know how to stand in my position. Maybe my spouse still wasn't figuring, he was still figuring out how to sit as a king. As much as it needs to help me to be able to stand confidently and allow him to be king over me, I also need to bring in that support to make sure I allow the house to be a space where he can own himself and sit as a king. At that early stage of marriage, communication is very, very important. Boundaries are very necessary. And what I'm saying here about the communication is not that sometimes this communication will be the outcome of several fights and screaming and arguments. I have to be sincere with you. It might come after several screaming at each other, and then we say, okay, let's act like adults here. What is it that you want? I didn't like the way you talked to me. Oh, I didn't like the way you screamed back at me too. Okay, how can we do this better? And then we have that constant communication. And then we iterate on it. The next year, let's see how we can do better. Okay, when I tell you I don't want you to do this, maybe you should know that that is something that I don't like, and you should listen to me the first time. And the second year in the marriage, she already told you she doesn't like you to buy things that we can't afford. But here are you, the woman of the house, looking for your royal robe, thinking those name brands are what will build your confidence, and you are shopping for the royal robes that you can't afford, using the money that you don't have to impress people who don't care. And now you purchase it. The fight started again, and we're still having these same arguments. This same argument is at the early stage. Both of you, there might still be the energy to start, but the goal is to continue to iterate on the process. We don't know the stage where Esther and the king was in their marriage. The Bible didn't let us know how far along they've gone in their marriage before this incident happened. But what this incident in Esther chapter 5 shows us is that these people are mature. They know how to act like mature people in their marriage. Each of them own their space. Each of them own their space. At the early stage of the marriage, you fight for your love. I'm shocked when I hear couples who don't fight. That is fine. That works for them. That is not work for me. But most of the time, when I want to make a case in my marriage, I have to set my premise and make my conclusion. And then my husband will say, oh, I see. Okay, let's do it this way. And then we have that communication. And I'm not saying that communication is happening right off. That communication might come after some screaming that would involve us now saying, okay, let's sit down, we are adults here, let's talk. In marriage, the marriage relationship is an experience. Who you are married to is not a person, is an experience, which is why who you are becoming in that marriage matter. When a relationship becomes toxic, and the way we want to solve our argument is only through domestic violence, then that is becoming a very toxic relationship. That is no longer healthy. We should be able to sit down as adults and talk through things. So when you find couples who are fighting or having argument, it's because they still have something to fight for in that marriage. It shows that they are still interested in that marriage. When you see couples who don't fight or who are not interested in having any meaningful conversation on anything, it shows that they've already given up on that relationship. And it will take the grace of God for that relationship to be sustained for a longer time. So fighting for your love is something that you want to establish at the early on of your marriage. If you could get to the communication part without screaming, that is very good. Get it started. Get talking. And something that I want to share in the early part of my relationship, and I think it was my mom that told me this. I recalled I'd visited home. I was already working and I visited home, and I was just thinking to myself that, okay, I know marriage will happen at some point, and I visited home. It was very late in the night that we got home because my mom picked me from the park and we got home very late. I don't know, maybe we went to a store and then we got home very late that night. And I was in my room and I started hearing noises coming from the neighbor. And I ran to my mom's room and I said, what's going on here? Oh, my mom said they started again. I said, started what? He said they've been fighting. I said, fighting? I came for their wedding. That was like 4 months ago. And the wife is pregnant. Isn't that dangerous? And my mom said she had spoken to both of them several times, that she doesn't know what to do. I said, how did they get to this point? My mom said, I want you to listen to me and listen very, very well. Don't let violence be your strategy for resolving arguments in your marriage. And I said, how do I do that? How can I do that? He said, every time you have an argument, don't let it be that only when you guys start throwing punches at each other that you would now sit down and start acting like adults. Don't even let him put his hands on you. Okay, mom, I said, I want you to be very, very clear on what you're saying now. Why will my man who loved me put his hands on me? She said, it starts at the beginning of the relationship. If at the beginning of the relationship, if every time you are having argument, you start saying, are you going to eat me? And you are bringing in, and you are saying, are you going to eat me? You are already teaching that man how to treat you. If at the point when the argument is getting tense and hot, you decided to keep quiet, or you decided to shut your mouth, you are telling him that in this relationship, I am a queen. I control my stand. I am not going to let you bring me down to your level. I am going to treat myself as a queen. And you shut your mouth at that point, then that is going to stop every drama or whatever argument, whatever tense is happening in that argument, into making it even worse. And I said, okay, mom, I still know that part. But what if the man or the partner is charging towards you and they are kind of becoming very violent? My mom said, run, baby, run. I can't forget that. My mom said, run, baby, run. Don't let him put his hands on you. Because once he puts his hands on you at the early on in that relationship, that will be the default mechanism of resolving any argument in that marriage, and it will be difficult for him to stop. I learned that lesson. I would remember to treat myself as the queen and take my stand. So I was talking about this marriage, and I quickly want to share with you what Esther did that made the king to ask, what is your request? Up to half of the kingdom. What is your petition? Up to half of the kingdom. Let me know, and it will be done. What did this woman do to attract that level of confidence, that level of open access to her husband? What did she do? She played to her strengths. She played to her sensuality. She played to whatever she knows that makes her husband give her that look. You all know that look. If you don't know the look, go and find it in your relationship. Because like I said, every relationship has a stage, the early stage, the middle stage. At the middle stage, both of you are now getting older, more mature. You understand each other's boundary. That is the expectation when you are in that middle range in your relationship. You want to consciously keep the romance alive, because at that middle stage of the marriage, sometimes you are aging. There are some distractions with the children coming in. There are some distractions with the families coming in. There are some distractions with some health situation coming in. There are some distractions with job situation, work situation, financial situation coming in. Those distractions will come in because there are so many unexpected things that happen to us in life. We want it to be smooth. We want to live happily ever after once we get the ring. But life happens. And when that life happens in the middle of the marriage, we want to know that both of us are allies. We are partners. We are partners. Whatever is happening with the finance is outside. Whatever is happening with the family is outside. Whatever is happening with health is outside. Both of us are partners. We will deal with the health situation together. We will deal with the family situation together. We will deal with the financial situation together. We will raise the children together. We will manage our career together. We are allies. We are partners. We are working together. We are playing to win. We are playing to win. So when you get to that middle stage in your marriage, your goal is to continue to play to win. Because once you start allowing the financial situation and the career growth and the children, the commitment to the parenting and the commitment to the family to start taking the priority over your relationship, you're going to see both couple drifting apart. Now, there is a couple that wants to go and take a job in another country. Now the woman is all over the world, jet-trotting all over the world, and she spent just a few days in the month with her family because there are commitments. I'm not saying you should not follow your growth or your passion or your career passion or your career growth, but you want to think of it together as an ally. At that middle stage in your relationship, that is when the tax return becomes very complicated. You want to think of it together. You are ally. You are ally. Because whatever you are bringing into that relationship at that point as a priority might change the dynamics of the relationship. This is the middle stage. This is when you want to set healthy boundaries that your children will look at and will say, I want my marriage to look like the relationship between my mom and my dad. This is the situation at the stage of this relationship when you are building things together for the long term. When you are thinking of your retirement plan together for the long term. When you are thinking about your 401k together for the long term. When you are thinking about your health condition together for the long term. Because like I said, who you marry is not a person, it's an experience. We think we're going to be healthy, but sometimes shocks come and we get that negative results that we don't want to look at. And now we have to provide health care. We have to become that health care provider for the man who was 6 packs, who used to be healthy. And now you have to provide emotional support and journey and support and care to take him through that health condition. Now you have to find yourself in a situation where you have to provide that health care and sit and cook, because that woman who used to be on her feet running is now dealing with some health condition that is making her to scream sometimes and making her to be quiet, making her to be moody sometimes and making her to need some emotional therapy sometimes. The middle stage in marriage comes with some lot of drama. Keeping that ally, staying together as an ally to navigate those situations, those challenges is very, very key to the middle stage. To the middle stage in the marriage. Because at some point, all the work, the cause for work will die down. You will retire. At some point, the children will move out. You will become an empty nester. At some point, the finances and the savings that you have put together is what you will rely on. Because even though you have the energy to work, you don't have the resources or the strength to be able to do the work. The relationship is now at the late stage. The boundaries that you have set in place at the early stage and at the middle stage is what will take you to the later stage of your relationship. That will sustain you in the later stage of your marriage. That is why in the middle stage of the marriage, there's a lot of distraction. Because at that point, both of you are still very attractive. At that point in the relationship, both of you are earning well. If both of you are working, there is money coming in, there is promotion coming in, there is all the different vibes. But don't let the vibe distract you. If you have been called into the marriage relationship, don't let the vibe distract you, because it's all going to be temporary. At the later stage, that is when you will know who you are married to, because now the wrinkles are all in. Now the vivaciousness and the vavavoom that you bring to the table is no longer there. Now the romance just turns into you smiling at each other and just rubbing each other's head. Because even though the romance is still there, the energy to go into the energetic aspect of the marriage, the energetic aspect of romance, including the sex aspect, is no longer there. That is the later stage of marriage. And what sustains you in this later stage of marriage is built at the early stage and the middle stage. So you don't want to miss that part. Before I wrap up in this video, let me just highlight what played to Esther's winning in the palace on our relationship. Because as a woman, when you are rising, there is a likelihood that you may see yourself rising and your financial capability becomes even stronger than the one for your spouse. That is a possibility. When this woman rose, she didn't forget something. That she has a rope, that she has a stand, that she gives her husband space. She gave her husband space. She put on her own robe, a robe of confidence, a robe of prayer, a robe of strength, a robe of self-esteem, a robe of silence, a robe of listening. Because when the king said, "What do you want? What is your request? What is your petition?" Up to half of the kingdom, she didn't start listing all the requests one by one. I want a jet. Oh, let's buy me a franchise. Oh, how about the head of my enemy? No. This woman asked the king, "Can I get more of you? More of you. Can you come into another dinner with me? Can you just give me more of your presence?" She played to the king's ego. When you tell a man that all I want is more of you, more of your presence, the king said, "Oh, that's all you have? We're coming. We're coming. You only want a dinner with me? I am coming. Oh, you want me to bring Haman? I'm bringing Haman." And the king showed up. And he repeated again, "What do you want, my bride? What do you want, my queen? What is your petition? What is your request?" In the next video, we'll talk about the difference between petition and request. But I want you to pay attention to this. On the first night, this woman was patient enough. She wore the garment of patience. She didn't just start badging the king with all her requests. She said, "I would like to have another dinner with you, another audience with you." I mean, she's building the momentum. This is a woman who understands that you build the momentum of marriage. You don't just start as soon as you get the audience, you start badging with your request. She built the momentum. She said, I would like you to come for another dinner. A garment of patience, a royal robe of patience, a royal robe of calmness, a royal robe of self-confidence. It is a royal robe of self-confidence that allows this woman to know that you own your space and you give your man his own space. Every man likes to be in their own space. They like to do their own thing. So when you allow a man to be a king in his own house and have his own space, you are helping that man build his confidence, and you are promoting his ego. I'm not saying ego is good, but you want your man to be able to sit. When you allow the man sit, it's easier for you to stand in your own royal robe, in your own royal robe, knowing that what you bring to the table is going to trigger something in him, because you have allowed him to sit enough, to sit calmly enough to see you, to sit calmly enough to see what you bring to the table, to sit calmly enough to listen to you. A woman who knows her strength, a woman who knows her rope, a woman who knows herself. That was Esther. Be like Esther. Thank you for joining me on the Our Platform. This is the Our Platform. Let me know what you think in the comments, and see you in the next video.